Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Black Hole Podcast entitled Femme Party, which is also the title of a book that I've written, and I'm reading it chapter by chapter in this Season 2. We're going to start Chapter 6 shortly, but I like to precursor every time I read by saying any money raised, any profit from this book will be used to start a solar farm in my hometown and to start a technology company similar to the one proposed in this book. So let's get right into Chapter 6. A drone launches from Clarion University Venango campus in Oil City, and we watch through its camera as it flies along the Allegheny River. It climbs over the houses of Oil City and flies for several blocks before homing in on one large Victorian house blocks from the campus. There are 3 people gathered on the back deck of the house. The drone flies lower and lower, coming closer to the deck. We can see it is 2 females and a male on the deck. As the drone comes within 40 yards of the deck, the man pulls up a shotgun. An explosion of sparks erupts from the end of the shotgun and the drone sputters down into the backyard of the house. Tim Allen exclaims, "Whoa, haha." Lucy Lou says, "Feels good, doesn't it?" Tim says, "Yeah, I get one every month or so. The key is a shotgun, though. I can never hit them with a pistol." Levy says, "Mitch should be here any minute." Tim says, "I want to thank you guys again for setting up this meeting." Mitch comes around to the backyard and picks up the sparking drone. Mitch, throwing the drone in the garbage can, says, "Looks like you got another one." Lucy says, "Tim got that one." Mitch comes up onto the deck and shakes Tim's hand. "Nice to finally meet you." Tim says, "I love the show Racing for Change, and I want to get involved if I can." Lucy says, "Oh yeah, the show where men get a chance to be part of a technology company? You promised that all of your good technology ideas would stay with women." Mitch says, "I won't lose, Lucy. They won't get a piece of it." Tim says, "Yeah, especially with me on the pit crew." Mitch says, "My dad used to watch Dome Improvement religiously when I was growing up. He's a huge fan." Tim says, "I would be happy to meet him sometime." Mitch says, "I suppose we could work you into the show in some way." Tim says, "I just want to be in on these builds. They are amazing." Levy says, "I got the patents for the hooded sweatshirts passed in China and Vietnam. There is a manufacturer that can make the shirts in Vietnam, but I don't have much of a market for them yet." Mitch says, "That is great news. I have big plans for these shirts. Now, I think you should begin a shirt company in the United States that prints designs on them and sells them online. I could lend you my Richard Potato design. Then you could print any leader or dictator you want on the shirts and sell them globally." Levy says, "I think I should stay local at first. I thought of a funny design. I've noticed that in addition to Heinz ketchup, which started in Pittsburgh, that many stores also have Hunt's ketchup. I was thinking of a design that incorporates the label design but says first name Mike, last name Hunt's ketchup." Everyone on the deck laughs at Levy's design idea. Mitch says, "That's a good one. I had an idea for a design. It's a graphic of a director's chair with walk-in printed on the back, and a steaming taco on a plate sitting on the seat. Under the graphic are the words, 'Christopher Walken Taco.'" They laugh again. Lucy says, "I thought of one that's good for the holidays. It involves a spice bottle label that says, 'It's about time,' spelled Thyme. Laughter erupts from the backyard. Tim says, "How about a soup label that says, first name Mike, last name Latoris's clam chowder?" The group laughs once again. Levy says, "These are some good ideas to start with. I'll reach out to some local printers to develop the design. My friend can get started on the website." Mitch says, "This is great news. I'll circle back around with a route for these hooded sweatshirts with buttons on the sleeves. I think you'll like the direction I want to go with them, Levy." Lucy, getting a chill from the early spring air, says, "Shall we go inside for a drink or tea?" Mitch says, do you have beer? Lucy says, of course. A maroon 1985 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham and the black 1980 Bevy Malibu face off on the causeway at Lake Wilhelm. Bruce Millis sits behind the wheel of the Caddy, and Mitch is in the car he had owned when he was 16 years old. Emma drops her hands again, and the tires screech as the two vehicles launch down the flat quarter-mile stretch. The two cars are even at the halfway point, but the Malibu pulls away in the end. The two cars pull into the marina and the drivers exit. Shaking hands, Mitch says, that was closer than Brad's. Mitch says, it was indeed. How did you get that boat to take off like that? Bruce says, we made a video of how to convert it into a standard EV with 2 motors, and then we made an additional video of how to make it all-wheel drive with 4 motors. Brad Pith walks over from Bruce's trailer to talk to the two. Brad says, that is a nice trailer. Shame to see it go. Bruce says, it's time for an upgrade anyway. Been with that trailer since Armageddon. Brad says, can you swing by tonight, Mitch? I'll be at your mom's place. Mitch says, good one, Brad. I'll be over. Bruce says, I'm in the guest house, so I'll ride up with you, Mitch. Later that evening, Brad is having a little wrap party with some of the crew at Mitch's parents' house in Utica. Taxidermy animals hang on the walls of most of the common rooms. Celebrity musician Mac White, Emma Strone, Bruce Millis, Brad Pith, and Mitch Miller are gathered around the kitchen counter enjoying cocktails. Brad says, well, Mitch, I asked you how I could help with your YouTube channel, Disability TV, and you asked for a meeting with Mac White. Introducing Mac White of the White Pipes. Mitch and Mac shake hands. Mitch says, the reason I wanted to talk with you, Mac, is because I'm aware of your record-pressing operation. Mac says, I've had the business for many years now. What are you interested in? And what is Disability TV? Mitch says, before I was wealthy, I was on Social Security disability monthly payment because of my diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. I decided that since I didn't have a physical disability that prevented me from hiking, biking, or kayaking, I would capture my outdoor activities on a GoPro camera and publish them to a channel I named Disability TV on YouTube. Over the years, I've gotten quite a following from the disabled community, and I want to take the next step for the fledgling media company. Max says, and what step might that be? Mitch says, I assume that through making albums for your company, you have the supply chain to make custom album covers with the artist's artwork on them. Max says, my company is able to do that. Mitch says, thanks to Bruce and Brad's contacts in the celebrity sports community, I have been working on a deal to allow photographers to cover professional sports games. Not just any photographers, though. I want Disability TV to employ disabled photographers to cover these games. The next phase for Disability TV is to establish a trading card company. Max says, you want my company to make trading cards for you? Mitch says, I want to partner with your company. Each independent photographer will not only be employed by Disability TV, but they will also own it as a cooperative. Max says, I'll need some capital for expansion, but this will allow me to bring a lot more production in-house. I'm all for helping the disabled community. Brad says, I'll invest. Bruce says, count me in. Emma says, you two just want in on something hot because you each lost your race and couldn't get in on the My Junkyard platform. I'll invest because I care about the disabled, Mitch. Brad says, say what you want, but we are changing the world with this show, and I was just surprised Mitch didn't take advantage of the opportunity to expand this little media venture. I've been a fan of the channel for years. Bruce says, everyone at least knows someone that is disabled. It affects most people in some way, and I think this new trading card idea is genius. Maybe we can have trading cards of our electric stock car racers. By the way, Volkswagen and Porsche are both developing stock cars with easily changeable batteries for long races. Brad says, it's really coming together for our charity race. The trunk compartments of the car accept smaller cell batteries, each weighing around 80 pounds. Once a pit person sets a cell in the cradle, the electric system locks the battery into the terminals and secures it in place. A button on top of the battery releases it from the cradle in seconds. Bruce says some of the Hollywood studios are getting involved as well. The studios pay classic car collectors to use their cars on street shots when they shoot period pieces. They are offering higher rates to rent classic cars that are electric than those that are fossil fueled. The studios want to work with your people at My Junkyard and classic car collectors to figure out what cars we should shoot video on in addition to the ones we are making for the islands. The studios want to sponsor our in-depth videos of building these classic electric vehicles, but don't want to interfere with the Caribbean Islands project. Mitch says, that's great news, and kind of what I was hoping for when I began this project with you guys. Send me the contacts you want me to get in touch with, and I'll follow up this week. Brad says, Bruce and I are forming a production company to shoot the videos and distribute them through the My Junkyard app. Mitch says, before you leave the area, Mac, would you mind meeting with a few friends of mine about another project you might enjoy? Mac says, I'm staying for the next 2 weeks to watch this show tape, so just text me about availability. Mitch is back in Pittsburgh due to his campaign obligations. He is sitting in his dining room at his house in the city. Seated across the large table made of American wormy chestnut, which Mitch built himself, is a reporter from Pittsburgh Periodical. She begins asking questions. The Pittsburgh Periodical reporter says, what new ideas will you bring to the table as mayor of Pittsburgh? Mitch says, I have many new ideas for the city, and because I am a technology CEO, I stand in a unique position to enact them in real time. First and foremost is a site where every resident can vote on all new proposals and laws. Secondly, I would invest my own private money to improve public transit. The reporter says, would this be related to your case to get every resident free, unlimited wireless data and service? Mitch says, if we are successful in delivering that, it would make improving public transit easier, but I believe we can do it either way. What I am proposing is improving the Port Authority website so that people can reserve a seat on a bus a day or days before they want to ride. This would enable the Port Authority to adjust how many buses they need at each time and day. The rider would log into the site or use the app to reserve a seat on a regular route. The goal is that each bus have only the amount of seats filled with no one standing on the bus. Dispatchers and algorithms would patch together those people only going 2 stops on the bus with those who are commuting to the suburbs. We would pre-plan the routes of each person traveling by bus so that everyone has a seat and a seat is rarely empty. People would be incentivized monetarily for reserving their seats in advance. The reporter says, what about the elderly that don't use smartphones and are rarely on the internet? Mitch says, as is customary, a person could give up their seat to an elderly person if they just walk on the bus. But I would invest in training and outreach program to help elderly people use smartphones to access the app. The key to getting elderly people to use the internet is to not change the look of the software constantly so that they have to figure out new ways to do the same thing they had been doing. I believe my company can deliver that. The reporter says someone commuting from a park and ride in the suburbs may pay the same amount as someone going 2 stops. Mitch says, yes, we would incentivize people to commute from the suburbs using public transit instead of driving cars, but they would only receive the discount if they reserved 2 days in advance. The reporter says, you imagine a city where most people commute using public transit? Mitch says, if enough people vote on incentivizing public transit to make our streets safer for pedestrians and bicyclists, then there are plenty of ways to do that. I have some ideas, but I'm sure others do as well. The first step is organizing a public transit system that works for people who want to commute instead of drive. The reporter says, what are some other ideas you could more easily enact as mayor of Pittsburgh? Mitch says, sure. If I weren't the head of a large technology firm, which allows me to tackle larger issues like public transit, I would focus on simple things that could improve the lives of more residents. As you may know, I received a Bachelor of Film Studies at the University of Pittsburgh and have studied media extensively. There's both a school for the blind and a school for the deaf in Pittsburgh. The School for the Deaf has an independent media program that produces a news program for people within the school. I would make the news program produced at the School for the Deaf the default evening news program for the City Channel. Every weeknight at 5 or 6 p.m., the City Channel would broadcast the School for the Deaf's news program for any resident to see. Eventually, we could work with the School for the Blind so that they could help with the news broadcast as well. The reporter says, do you consider yourself a champion for the disabled? Mitch says, having a disability myself puts me in a position to empathize with others that have to deal with issues society labels as a disability. My disability does not prevent me from experiencing many things. For this I am lucky. In other ways, I have seen the inside of a system that is pretty ugly. I believe we can work to improve these systems that disproportionately affect the poor and minorities. Reporter says, while we're talking about the poor and minorities, do you believe in paying reparations to African Americans? Mitch says, I believe that the key to reparations is to offer money to African Americans that will be used to improve their overall standing in this crazy society. My City of Pittsburgh plan would involve raising the income tax on only the highest tax bracket by around 8%. The reporter says, why 8%? Mitch says, it is my belief that it is incumbent upon the wealthy to sponsor culture. The federal income tax rate for the EU hovers around 45% for the wealthiest, and they have arguably some of the best culture in the world. An 8% local income tax rate would mean the wealthiest residents would pay around 45% income taxes altogether. If we use culture as a gauge for the measure of wealth in a nation, we can see that higher tax rates don't hinder the wealth of a nation. The reporter says, what would you do with this revenue? Mitch says, first, I would pay for tax preparation for every resident in Pittsburgh. I believe it is ridiculous that the government doesn't make it easier for people to pay their taxes. Small businesses face complicated tax code. This way they could have their taxes done for free. The reporter says, so the city would employ an army of accountants to do people's taxes? Mitch says, I don't think it would take an army because a lot of citizens do their taxes online. We would ensure that taxes filed online are free at local, state, and federal levels. As a former small business owner, I know how complicated it can be to try to project your taxes for the year. The city would field more accountants either by subcontracting or hire them as city employees, whichever is cheaper and makes more sense. These accountants would help all small business owners or those businesses with less than 50 employees with their taxes. This should stimulate more small business, which means a stronger economy overall. The reporter says, would your company develop tax software then? Mitch says, the city would develop tax software with the help of my company that it could then sell or barter to other cities that want to protect their citizens from IRS tax audits. No one should live with a cloud over their head, wondering if they paid enough on their taxes or if they will owe back taxes. This is the burden of having a small business. You have stress and anxiety over whether you are doing everything legally or whether you will be fined. It is a form of government terrorism, and the only way to counter it is for cities to back up their tax decisions of their citizens. The reporter says, are you suggesting we live under a terrorist regime? Mitch says, I am simply saying that small business owners live in a constant state of fear, and it can cause mental health issues. Furthermore, it discourages people from starting a small business or making a small business legitimate. I want to make it easier for small businesses to thrive in a land that seems to have no lack of regulation. The reporter says, and with the remaining funds from your 8% tax, Mitch says those would go towards grants for any African American or Native American living in the city to pay for a college of their choice. In addition, you have heard of these lending websites that pair borrowers with people that have money directly to create a loan. The reporter says, yes, I'm aware of direct lending sites. Mitch says, we would team up with a local bank to create a marketplace for African Americans and Native Americans to get interest-free direct loans for college. Wealthy Americans in the top tax bracket will be able to loan money for college to these minorities interest-free in order to lower the amount of income they have to pay taxes on. In other words, when they find out their tax burden at the end of the year, they can log into a site that allows them to offer a loan for college to reduce their income. The loans are interest-free, but the income will come back to them without them having to pay taxes on that specific income. These wealthy residents will get their money back in installments without having to pay the 8% tax on it. I will try to pass this same incentive program through at the state and federal levels as well, so that they essentially get their money back totally tax-free because they used it to help African American and Native Americans go to college. Instead of wealthy Americans gaining interest on their money, which is also taxed, they will be able to have their income back without the 45% tax on it if they are willing to wait until a student is out of college and begins repaying the loan. The reporter says the tax money goes to grants for the minorities, or people are incentivized to offer interest-free loans to these minorities so they can go to college. Mitch says exactly. The lenders can even motivate these students to pay off sooner by saying if they keep a 3.5 grade point average and pay off in 5 years, they only have to pay back 93% of the loan. Or if they have a 3.0 GPA and pay off in 10 years, they only have to pay back 95% of the loan. These are the options direct lending can give us, and I believe that student loans should be interest-free anyway. The reporter says this could turn into a huge federal program managed at the local level. Mitch says, I'm hoping if enough people make a stand in the city of Pittsburgh, we can get this passed through at the state and federal level. Once every African American and Native American that once one has a degree from a college of their choice, then the program can be expanded to other classes, such as police or the children of government employees, people on welfare, former prisoners. If picked up by enough cities, we could allow every person that gets into a college or trade school to have the loans they need to get through school completely interest-free. The reporter says, can you summarize your plan one more time for me? It says, sure. We raised the local income tax from 1% to 8% on only the highest tax bracket and used the revenue to guarantee free tax preparation for every resident in Pittsburgh. The remaining revenue goes to grants for all African American and Native American citizens of Pittsburgh to go to college or trade school, hypothetically for free. People in the highest tax bracket are incentivized to use a direct lending platform to lend African American and Native Americans money for college or trade school interest-free. The incentive for these wealthy Americans is that the money they lend will be tax-free and will not count against their total income for taxes. Therefore, they could lend enough money to bring them down into a lower tax bracket and prevent them from paying the higher rate. And the money will return to them in due time tax-free. Instead of gaining interest on their investment, they get their money in incremental payments after 2 or 4 years without it being taxed at a rate as high as 45%. The reporter says, do you think you can pass this at the state and federal level? Mitch says, I think if we get Philadelphia on board with this program, we have a good chance of passing it at the state level. I've been working with some federal congresspeople to draft an adjustment to the tax law. This new legislation involves the payroll tax businesses pay into Social Security. Currently, an employer like a sole proprietor pays a payroll tax on all of his or her employees, but does not qualify for Social Security themselves unless they pay themselves through payroll and pay all associated taxes. My tax legislation says that if a sole proprietor pays into Social Security in any regard, they will qualify for Social Security when they come of age. Therefore, they can simply run the business and pay taxes on profit without having to put themselves on payroll. If they have a payroll and pay the payroll tax to Social Security, those payments will be tracked and qualify them for Social Security. I believe that this new direct lending plan can be attached to the legislation and passed federally as a package. The reporter says, great, I think I have enough for an article. Would I be able to get some pictures for the magazine? Mitch says, sure. Could we get a few with my spouse? Maybe us sitting at the table and some in the living room? The reporter says, that would be nice. And that's the end of chapter 6. So before I go to my advertisements from my sponsors, Again, the book is available on Amazon Kindle by searching Femme Party. You can also go to either my websites, plotm.com, that's plot, the letter m.com, or mitch4mayor.com, that's Mitch, the number 4mayor.com. Check out the artwork, check out my campaign, and you'll find the link to the book and to the podcast. So, I've been ending each chapter by saying there are some interesting ideas for businesses and technology startups in the book. I've kept some for myself. I've kept some to develop myself. And basically, I want season 3 of this podcast to be how to start a technology startup from the ground up. I have a good idea for a social media platform that's designed to fight misinformation on the internet. And I think it's a good idea. If you know a computer science person that might be interested in partnering up on this, I've saved some money to invest, and I'm looking for 5 or 6 or 7 partners to develop a social media platform. I can send them the description of the social media platform via email. Again, you can go to those websites, use the email form to fill in your information and email me. It goes directly to my emails, and I'll email you back directly with the description. I've also written an operating document and a page for investors. So if you want to invest in it, again, just contact me through my websites. I prefer to do that rather than list my email on here or on my website. It's just a little bit of a buffer. And also, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make about the book, you can use my websites to contact me and ask a question. I might do a couple episodes after I finish the book of just questions or comments, addressing those. And if you'd like to remain anonymous, I'll keep all those questions anonymous unless you want to be mentioned on the podcast, in which case specify that after your question. Otherwise, I'll assume they're anonymous. And thanks for listening. And here's a word from our sponsors in my best announcer voice. Are you looking for family camping at its best? Go to French Creek Farms in Utica, Pennsylvania. Stay in the cottage, the trapper cabin, or any of the luxurious sites located next to the French Creek. Kayak right into your campsite. At French Creek Farms, family camping at its best. Are you looking for a drink in Utica, Pennsylvania? Go to Krabby Kelly's for all your STDs. That's snacks, tobacco, and drinks. Krabby Kelly's. It's a general store and a bar along French Creek right next to the Utica Bridge. Take a jump off the Utica Bridge and get yourself a frozen cocktail at Krabby Kelly's. Find yourself in Incheon, South Korea? Stop by Liquor Burger. Get yourself a burger and a mug of suds. And tell them Mitch sent you. Do you need a screen-printed shirt or embroidered logo on a garment? Look no further than 542 Prints. Go to 542prints.com and get directed to the website where you can order designs and on shirts, screen printed or embroidered. Look to 542 Prints for all your screen printing and embroidery needs. And since it was mentioned in this chapter, would you like to watch hiking, high definition hiking, kayaking, and bicycling? Go to Disability TV. It's a YouTube page. Search Disability Space TV and watch and go to a playlist of a hike. Go to the playlist of a hike at Disability TV today, and subscribe to the channel if you would. Thanks for supporting, and thanks for listening. Tune in for the next chapter.